The morning sun painted the Atacama Desert in shades of gold and red when Dr. Marcus Chen first heard the sound. It was not the gentle hum of his research station's solar panels or the soft whistle of wind through the metal framework. This was different. This was the sharp crack of something heavy hitting the desert floor, followed by a low rumbling that made the coffee in his mug ripple. Marcus set down his morning report on sustainable water collection and walked to the observation deck. In the distance, perhaps 2 kilometers from his isolated research station, a column of black smoke rose into the clear Chilean sky. The engineer in him was curious. The human in him was concerned. Someone might be hurt. He grabbed his emergency kit and climbed into his solar-powered rover. The vehicle moved silently across the rocky terrain, its advanced battery system carrying him toward the crash site with ease. As he got closer, Marcus could see that whatever had crashed was not from Earth. The metal was too smooth, too perfectly curved. The color was wrong too, a deep purple that seemed to shift in the sunlight like oil on water. The craft was about the size of a small airplane, but shaped like a teardrop. Steam rose from various parts of its hull, and strange symbols glowed faintly along what might have been its side. Marcus parked his rover at a safe distance and approached on foot, his emergency kit in hand. "Hello?" he called out in English, then repeated the greeting in Spanish and the few words of Mandarin he remembered from university. "Is anyone hurt?" A section of the craft's hull suddenly became transparent, like one-way glass switching off. Inside, Marcus could see a figure moving. The being that emerged was unlike anything he had ever seen, even in the wildest science fiction movies. The creature stood about 7 feet tall and appeared to be made of living crystal. Its body was translucent blue-green, with geometric patterns that pulsed with inner light. It had 4 arms, each ending in hands with too many fingers, and its head was larger than a human's, with faceted surfaces that caught and reflected the desert sun. When it moved, it made a sound like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. The being looked at Marcus with what might have been eyes, bright points of light deep within its crystalline head. When it spoke, the words came not from any visible mouth, but seemed to resonate from its entire body. Somehow, impossibly, Marcus understood every word. "You are the local sentient, I presume," the being said, its voice carrying tones that seemed both ancient and dismissive. "I am Zixithari, Professor of Comparative Civilizations at the Hegemony Academic Council. My vessel has experienced what you would call technical difficulties." Marcus blinked, still processing the fact that he was talking to an alien. "I'm Marcus Chen. Are you injured? Do you need medical help?" Zixithari made a sound that might have been laughter, but it reminded Marcus more of ice cracking. "Medical help? From a pre-space species? I think not. What I require is immediate shelter. My ship's life support systems are damaged, and I cannot survive in your primitive atmosphere for extended periods without proper accommodation." The alien looked around the desert with what Marcus interpreted as disdain. "I suppose your civilization has some form of temporary housing? Nothing elaborate is required. A basic structure with atmosphere control, temperature regulation, and minimal comfort amenities will suffice until my rescue arrives." Marcus felt a small spike of irritation at the being's tone, but pushed it down. This was clearly a first contact situation, and he needed to be diplomatic. "Of course, I can provide shelter. When you say atmosphere control and temperature regulation, what exactly do you need?" "Standard accommodations," Zixithari replied, waving one of its 4 hands dismissively. "Nitrogen-oxygen mix at 21%, humidity at 35%, temperature maintained at exactly 22 degrees Celsius, basic gravitational orientation naturally, perhaps some rudimentary entertainment systems and food preparation capabilities. Though I expect little from your technology level." The alien paused and looked at Marcus more carefully, as if seeing him for the first time. "You do have technology, don't you? Your species has progressed beyond mud huts and animal skins." Marcus kept his expression neutral, though inside he was beginning to feel less diplomatic and more challenged. "We have technology. I think I can build something that meets your needs." "Build?" Zixithari's crystalline form seemed to brighten with what might have been amusement. "Oh, you misunderstand. I require immediate shelter, not a construction project. Surely your people have standardized temporary accommodations available. I'll need to build something custom for your requirements," Marcus explained patiently. My research station isn't equipped for alien physiology. But don't worry, I can have something ready for you in a few days. The alien's glow dimmed and the harmonic quality of its voice took on a sharper edge. Days? I expected your species to be primitive, but surely you have some form of rapid deployment technology. Prefabricated structures? Modular systems? Marcus smiled, and there was something in that smile that would have worried anyone who knew him well. It was the smile he wore when someone told him that sustainable architecture was impossible, or that solar power couldn't work in remote locations, or that humans weren't clever enough to solve complex engineering problems. I'll build you something appropriate, he said simply. You can stay in my research station until it's ready. The guest quarters aren't much, but they'll keep you alive. Zixathari looked at the human's modest research station in the distance, a collection of low, efficient buildings surrounded by solar panels and strange devices that the alien didn't recognize. The structures looked functional but basic, exactly what one would expect from a species that hadn't even achieved interstellar travel. Very well, the alien professor said, with obvious reluctance. I suppose I must endure whatever primitive accommodations you can provide. But please, attempt to make it minimally adequate. I am, after all, a distinguished member of the Hegemony Academic Council. I have lectured on 17 worlds and published papers on the development patterns of emerging civilizations. I am accustomed to certain standards. Marcus nodded politely as he helped Zixathari gather some belongings from the crashed ship. The alien continued to explain its importance in the galactic community, describing advanced worlds and sophisticated technologies that made human achievements sound like children's toys. As they drove back to the research station in Marcus's rover, Zixathari examined the vehicle with the sort of attention an adult might give to a child's drawing. Polite, but clearly unimpressed. Solar collection panels, the alien observed. Quaint. Most species discover solar power early in their development, though I must admit, your efficiency ratings are somewhat better than expected for such a young civilization. Marcus said nothing, but his smile remained. Over the next few days, Zixathari would discover just how wrong it was possible to be about human engineering. The alien had demanded shelter, expecting to receive the bare minimum from what it assumed was a primitive species. Instead, Marcus, Chen was about to show an advanced alien civilization what humans were really capable of when they decided to build something appropriate. The sun climbed higher in the desert sky as they reached the research station, and Marcus was already planning. He had 3 days to build something that would exceed every expectation the alien professor had about human technology. 3 days to prove that sometimes the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy were the ones that learned to work with their environment, instead of simply dominating it. Thari was about to receive an education in human engineering that would change everything it thought it knew about primitive species. The guest quarters at Marcus Chen's research station were, as Zixathari had expected, primitive. The room was small and functional, with basic furniture and simple lighting. The air system worked well enough, and the temperature remained steady, but everything was clearly designed for human comfort rather than the sophisticated needs of a galactic academic. The alien professor spent the first evening examining the research station systems with growing disappointment. The humans had managed to create adequate life support and basic power generation, but nothing approached the elegance of hegemony technology. The computers were slow and clunky. The communication systems were laughably limited. Even the food preparation equipment seemed designed for the simplest possible operations. This is what passes for advanced technology among your species? Zixathari asked Marcus over dinner, gesturing with one of its 4 hands at the modest dining area. Marcus looked up from his meal, a simple combination of vegetables and protein that his food systems had synthesized from local materials. It serves our needs. We focus on sustainability and efficiency rather than complexity. Efficiency? The alien's crystalline body flickered with what might have been amusement. My dear human, true efficiency comes from advanced automation and sophisticated resource management. Your systems appear to require constant manual intervention. They require understanding, Marcus corrected gently. There's a difference. Zixathari made that ice-cracking sound again. Of course. I forget that younger species often mistake manual labor for sophistication. No matter. I'm sure whatever shelter you construct will be adequate for my temporary needs. The next morning, Marcus began work on the aliens' requested accommodation. HFY watched from the observation deck of the research station, expecting to see the human lay out wooden beams or assemble metal prefabricated sections. Instead, Marcus spent the first hour doing something that looked almost like dance. He walked in careful patterns around a flat area about 50 meters from the research station, occasionally stopping to place small devices into the ground. Each device was about the size of a dinner plate and seemed to sink into the earth on its own. As Marcus worked, he consulted a tablet that displayed information HFY couldn't interpret from this distance. What is he doing? The alien wondered aloud. By midday, Marcus had placed perhaps 20 of the devices in a complex geometric pattern. Then he returned to his workshop and began assembling something that looked like a cross between a computer and a small factory. The device had multiple arms ending in different tools, and its base contained several chambers filled with what appeared to be basic materials: sand, metal fragments, and containers of various liquids. When HFY approached to observe more closely, Marcus looked up from his work. Soil analysis is complete. The foundation systems are already beginning to process local materials. I should have your shelter ready by tomorrow evening. Foundation systems? HFY looked back at the empty plot of land where Marcus had placed his devices. I see nothing but dirt, Marcus smiled. The systems are working below ground. They're processing silica from the sand, extracting trace metals, and beginning to create the base structure. The devices you see will manufacture everything we need from local materials. The alien professor examined the multi-armed machine Marcus was building. Up close, it was more complex than it had first appeared. The various chambers seemed to be separate processing units, and the mechanical arms moved with precision that was actually quite impressive for such a young species. Interesting, HFY admitted. A form of molecular assembly. Crude but functional. Most species don't develop nanomanufacturing until much later in their technological development. We call it 3D printing, Marcus said, making some adjustments to one of the device's arms. Though this system is more advanced than the basic models, it can work with a wider range of materials and create more complex structures. Still, the alien continued, I don't see how you plan to create proper atmospheric controls, temperature regulation, or entertainment systems using such primitive methods. These are sophisticated requirements that demand advanced technology. Marcus nodded absently, still focused on his work. We'll see. That afternoon, HFY watched as Marcus's underground systems began to produce visible results. The earth in the designated area started to move and shift as something rose from below. What emerged was not the foundation of a simple building, but a complex structure that seemed to grow like a crystal formation. The base was made of a material that looked like glass, but was clearly much stronger. As it rose from the ground, the walls formed themselves into graceful curves that reminded HFY of natural formations on its home world. The construction made no noise beyond a soft humming, and there was no sign of the heavy machinery that most species used for building. How is this possible? The alien asked when Marcus came to check on the progress. The underground systems create the basic structure using processed local materials, Marcus explained. Silicon-based composites are incredibly strong and can be shaped during formation. The printing systems add the more complex components as the structure grows. By evening, the building had reached its full height, about 3 meters tall and perhaps 10 meters in diameter. It was beautiful in a way that surprised HFY. Most temporary shelters were purely functional, but this structure had an organic quality that seemed to complement the desert landscape rather than intrude upon it. Tomorrow I'll install the internal systems, Marcus said as they watched the last of the wall sections form themselves. Climate control, artificial gravity fields, the synthesis units for food and entertainment. That's the more delicate work. HFY stared at the human. Artificial gravity fields. Your species has mastered gravitational manipulation. For small areas, yes. It's necessary for some of our research projects. Marcus spoke as if he were discussing something as mundane as plumbing. The food synthesizers are more challenging. I'll need to program them with your nutritional requirements and preferred flavors. You can create food synthesis systems? The alien's voice took on a sharper, more interested tone. Of course. How did you think we eat out here? Fresh food delivery? Marcus grinned. The synthesis units can create pretty much anything organic as long as they have the base materials and the correct programming. That night, HFY spent several hours reviewing its database of emerging civilizations. Artificial gravity manipulation and molecular-level food synthesis were technologies that most species didn't develop until they had achieved interstellar travel. Yet this human spoke of them as if they were common tools. Perhaps the alien professor thought it had underestimated this species. The next day brought even more surprises. Marcus's mechanical assembly system began installing components inside the shelter that were far more sophisticated than anything HFY had expected. The walls contained networks of fiber optic cables that could carry both power and information. The climate control systems were integrated directly into the building's structure, making them nearly invisible while providing precise environmental management. Most impressive were the solar collection systems. Rather than simple panels mounted on the roof, Marcus had created a material that was itself photovoltaic. The entire exterior surface of the building could collect solar energy, and it did so with an efficiency that made HFY's instruments give readings that seemed impossible. Your solar collection efficiency appears to be approximately 300% of standard hegemony specifications, the alien said, checking its scanner for the third time. Marcus looked up from programming the food synthesis unit. Really? I thought it might be higher than that. I had to use local materials, so I couldn't include some of the more advanced components. More advanced components? HFY's crystalline form brightened with excitement. What additional capabilities are possible? Well, quantum efficiency enhancement for one thing, and integration with atmospheric processing systems, but those require specialized manufacturing that I can't do in the field. Marcus spoke as if he were disappointed by these limitations. The alien professor was beginning to realize that its assumptions about human technology had been not just wrong, but catastrophically wrong. This was not a primitive species building crude shelters. This was a civilization that had developed along completely different lines from anything in the hegemony's experience. As Marcus completed the final installations, HFY found itself genuinely excited to see the finished result. Whatever this human had built, it was clearly going to be far more than the adequate temporary shelter the alien had requested. The sun was setting over the Atacama Desert when Marcus finally stood back from his work. The shelter gleamed in the golden light, its crystalline walls seeming to glow with inner fire. It was beautiful, functional, and completely unlike anything HFY had ever seen. Ready for the tour? Marcus asked, gesturing toward the entrance that had just formed itself in the wall. HFY moved toward the building, its excitement growing with each step. The human had promised appropriate shelter. What the alien was about to discover was that human definitions of appropriate were unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The entrance to the shelter opened as HFY approached, responding to the alien's presence with smooth silence. Instead of a simple door, the wall itself became permeable, creating an opening that sealed itself behind them once they had entered. The transition from the desert heat to the interior was instant and perfect. No temperature shock, no pressure change, just seamless comfort. HFY stopped just inside the entrance, its crystalline form flickering with amazement. This was not the basic shelter it had expected. This was not even close to basic. The interior was spacious and elegant, with curved walls that seemed to glow with soft, natural light. The illumination came from the walls themselves, which had been engineered to emit light that perfectly matched the alien's home star. The floor was made of the same glass-like material as the exterior, but it was warm to the touch and provided exactly the right amount of surface texture for comfortable movement. The lighting system analyzes your physiology and adjusts to optimal wavelengths, Marcus explained, watching the alien explore the main living area. It should feel exactly like natural sunlight from your homeworld. How do you know the spectral characteristics of my home star? HFY asked, unable to hide its surprise. Your ship's communication systems were still partially functional. I scanned the data storage and found references to your planet's stellar classification. The rest was just matching the physics to the biology. Marcus spoke as if this were the most natural thing in the world. The alien moved deeper into the shelter, discovering that what had looked like a single room from outside was actually a complex of interconnected spaces. The walls could become transparent or opaque on command, allowing Zixthari to create separate areas or open everything into one large space as desired. In what appeared to be a study area, Zixthari found a workstation that made it stop and stare. The surface was a single piece of crystal that responded to touch by displaying information in three-dimensional holographic projections. The system had somehow interfaced with the alien's damaged ship and recovered its research files, personal documents, and even entertainment preferences. "This is impossible," Zixthari whispered, manipulating the holographic interface with growing excitement. "Data recovery from damaged hegemony systems requires specialized equipment and advanced knowledge of our information architecture." "Information is information," Marcus replied. "The encoding methods were different from ours, but the underlying mathematical principles are universal. I had to write some new translation protocols, but that's just software." The alien accessed its personal files and found that everything was not only intact, but had been organized more efficiently than it had been on the original ship. The human had somehow analyzed Zixthari's work patterns and research interests, then structured the data to make it more accessible. "You read through my research?" the alien asked. "I needed to understand your requirements. I hope you don't mind, but I noticed some interesting correlations in your data on early-stage civilizations. I've added some analysis tools that might help with your work." Zixthari activated the analysis tools and found software that was more sophisticated than anything available on hegemony academic systems. The programs could identify patterns across vast datasets, create predictive models of civilization development, and even simulate the effects of different technological advancement paths. "This is professional-grade research software," the alien said, its voice filled with wonder. "Better than professional grade. How did you create this in 3 days?" "I didn't create it. I adapted existing tools we use for environmental modeling and resource management. The same mathematical frameworks that help us understand ecological systems work pretty well for understanding social and technological systems too." The alien moved on to explore the rest of the shelter, each discovery more amazing than the last. The sleeping area featured a bed that adjusted its firmness and temperature automatically to match Zixthari's physiological needs. The surface could become harder or softer, warmer or cooler, even change its molecular structure to provide different textures as desired. The food preparation area was a marvel of engineering. The synthesis units could create not just nutritious meals, but actual cuisine from Zixthari's homeworld. The system had analyzed the alien's biology and dietary requirements, then figured out how to create foods that would be both healthy and delicious for a crystalline metabolism. "I took some liberty with the flavors," Marcus said as Zixthari sampled a synthesized version of a favorite dish from home. "Your ship's records included some cultural files that mentioned food preferences, so I tried to match traditional preparation methods. The food was perfect. Not just nutritionally adequate or technically correct, but actually perfect. It tasted exactly like the meals Zixthari remembered from its youth, with subtleties of flavor that the alien hadn't experienced since leaving its homeworld decades ago." "This is not possible," the alien said again, but its voice was softer now, filled with something approaching awe. "Food synthesis at this level requires understanding of molecular gastronomy that most species never achieve. We've been working on sustainable food production for a long time," Marcus explained. "When you're trying to feed populations using minimal resources, you learn to be very precise about nutrition and flavor." But the greatest surprise was still to come. In the center of the shelter, Marcus had created what he called a meditation chamber. The room was perfectly spherical, with walls that could display any environment Zixthari desired. But more than that, the space contained a functional artificial gravity system that could be adjusted in real time. The alien floated in the center of the chamber, experiencing the weightlessness it had known as a child before artificial gravity became common on its world. The wall showed a perfect recreation of its home planet's sky, complete with the dual moons and the aurora effects caused by its sun's unique magnetic field. "How is this possible?" Zixthari asked for what felt like the 100th time. "Artificial gravity generation in such a small space should be impossible with portable equipment. It's just manipulating local space-time curvature," Marcus said, as if this explained everything. "The power requirements are high, but the solar collection system can handle it during the day and the battery storage takes care of night operations." "Just manipulating space-time curvature?" The alien's voice rose several harmonic levels. "You speak of gravitational manipulation as if it were plumbing." Marcus shrugged. "It's all just physics. The math is complex, but once you understand the principles, the engineering is straightforward." HFY spent the rest of the day exploring every aspect of the shelter, each system more impressive than the last. The communication array could contact anywhere in the local star system. The entertainment system had somehow recreated cultural content from the alien's home world. Even the waste processing system was more advanced than standard hegemony technology. As evening approached, the alien found itself in the main living area, floating in a comfortable chair that had molded itself to its body, while watching a perfect recreation of its favorite theatrical performance from home. The lighting had shifted to match the time of day on its birth world, and the air carried the faint scent of the crystalline forest it remembered from childhood. "I don't understand," HFY said when Marcus came to check on its comfort. "This level of technology, this attention to detail, this understanding of complex systems, your species should be traveling among the stars, not confined to a single world." Marcus sat down in a chair that formed itself from the floor to accommodate his human physiology. "We've been focused on other priorities, getting our own planet right before we worry about others, building sustainable systems, learning to work with our environment instead of just exploiting it." "But the implications," the alien continued, gesturing at the marvels surrounding them. "If your species can create this level of technology using only local materials in 3 days, what could you accomplish with proper resources and time?" "We'll find out eventually," Marcus said with a smile. "But there's no rush. We prefer to do things right rather than do them fast." HFY looked around the shelter that was far more than a shelter. It was a masterpiece of engineering, a work of art, and a demonstration of capabilities that exceeded anything the alien had seen from civilizations with thousands of years of space travel experience. "I owe you an apology," the alien said quietly. "I came here expecting to find a primitive species barely capable of providing basic accommodation. Instead, I have discovered master engineers who build palaces as casually as others build sheds." Marcus waved away the apology. "You worked with the information you had. Most species probably do develop technology differently from us. We just took our own path." As night fell over the Atacama Desert, HFY settled into its perfect bed in its perfect shelter, surrounded by technology that surpassed its wildest expectations. The alien had demanded basic accommodation from what it assumed was a primitive species. Instead, it had received a demonstration of human engineering that would change everything. It thought it knew about the development of civilization. Tomorrow, the alien professor would begin to understand that being teachers and students was not always what the galaxy expected. Outside, the desert stars shone down on a building that gleamed like a jewel. In 3 days had passed since HFY had moved into the shelter that Marcus called basic accommodation. The alien professor spent each morning floating in the meditation chamber, each afternoon exploring the analysis tools that had revolutionized its research, and each evening trying to understand how a supposedly primitive species had created technology that surpassed hegemony standards in every measurable way. On the 4th morning, HFY found Marcus in his workshop, tinkering with what appeared to be a small device that pulsed with internal light. The human looked up as the alien approached, setting aside his work with the casual manner of someone taking a brief break from an interesting hobby. "Good morning," Marcus said. "How did you sleep? Is the bed still comfortable, or do you need me to adjust the firmness settings?" "The accommodations are adequate," HFY replied, still unwilling to admit just how perfect everything was. "I wanted to ask you about the solar collection efficiency of my shelter. My instruments continue to show readings that seem impossible." Marcus wiped his hands on a cloth and walked over to a workbench covered with small devices and components. 300% efficiency? Yeah, that's about right for this setup. Not as good as I'd hoped, but field conditions always involve compromises. "You hoped for better than 300%? The alien's crystalline form flickered with disbelief. "The theoretical maximum efficiency for photovoltaic conversion is approximately 40% for most known materials. For basic photovoltaic, sure. But we don't use basic photovoltaic anymore." Marcus picked up one of the small devices from his workbench. It looked like a piece of crystalline material about the size of a coin, but it seemed to contain depths that hurt to look at directly. This is a quantum efficiency cell, Marcus continued, holding the device up to the light. Instead of just converting photons to electricity, it captures quantum energy states and maintains them in a stable field matrix. Then it releases the energy as needed. But the conversion process actually creates more usable power than the input photons contained. Extraterrestre stared at the device, trying to process what it was seeing. That violates conservation of energy. No, it just uses energy that was already there but not accessible through conventional methods. Quantum mechanics has all sorts of energy hiding in empty space. We just figured out how to tap into it. Marcus spoke as if he were explaining something obvious. You have mastered zero-point energy extraction? The alien's voice rose to frequencies that made Marcus's equipment vibrate sympathetically. To some degree. It's not perfect yet. We can only access a fraction of what's theoretically available. That's why I was disappointed with the 300% efficiency. In laboratory conditions, we've achieved closer to 800%. The alien professor sank slowly to the workshop floor, its legs no longer able to support it. 800% efficiency was not just beyond hegemony technology. It was beyond hegemony theory. The physics textbooks that Extraterrestre had studied and later taught claimed that such energy extraction was impossible. How long has your species possessed this technology? The alien asked. About 15 years for practical applications, though the theoretical work goes back about 50 years. Marcus set the quantum cell back on his workbench and picked up another device. This is actually more interesting, though. It's a molecular-scale environmental processor. The new device was even smaller than the first, no bigger than a grain of sand. But it seemed to contain moving parts that were somehow visible despite their microscopic size. As Marcus held it, the device was actively working on something, though what was impossible to determine without advanced sensors. It takes atmospheric gases and processes them into whatever molecular structures you need. Carbon dioxide becomes building materials, water vapor becomes hydrogen fuel, nitrogen becomes organic compounds for food synthesis. Very handy for remote work. Marcus spoke as casually as if he were describing a simple tool. Atmospheric, molecular conversion on that scale. Thari's voice trailed off as it tried to calculate the implications. The energy requirements alone should be enormous. They would be if we were using brute force methods. But when you work with molecular systems instead of against them, the energy costs drop dramatically. Most of the work is done by the molecules themselves. We just provide guidance and a little push in the right direction. The alien struggled to understand what it was hearing. The hegemony's greatest scientists had spent centuries trying to develop efficient molecular conversion systems. The few working prototypes required massive power sources and could only operate under carefully controlled laboratory conditions. Yet this human spoke of portable devices that worked in open atmosphere using ambient energy. I need to understand this better, Extraterrestre said, rising slowly from the floor. Would you be willing to explain the theoretical foundations of your technology? Marcus looked surprised. You want to learn about human engineering? I thought you were the expert on primitive civilizations. I am beginning to think, the alien said slowly, that I may have misjudged which of us represents the more advanced civilization. For the next several hours, Marcus walked Extraterrestre through the principles behind human sustainable technology. The alien discovered that humanity had not developed along the same technological path as other species in the galaxy. Instead of focusing on raw power and resource exploitation, humans had learned to work in harmony with natural systems. Most species try to impose their will on the environment, Marcus explained as they examined the waste processing systems in the research station. They build bigger engines, stronger materials, more powerful energy sources. We took a different approach. We learned to ask what the environment wanted to do naturally, then found ways to guide those processes toward our goals. The waste processor was a perfect example. Instead of burning or chemically breaking down waste materials, the system used carefully designed bacterial colonies that ate waste and produced useful byproducts. The process was so efficient that the system actually improved the local environment by cleaning pollutants from soil and air. The bacteria are specially engineered, Extraterrestre asked, studying the living components of the system. Guided evolution, Marcus corrected. We don't force genetic changes. We create environments where natural selection favors the traits we want, then let biology do the work. It takes longer than direct genetic manipulation. but the results are much more stable and adaptable. The alien professor spent the afternoon learning about human approaches to energy storage, materials science, and systems integration. Each technology was more elegant than the last, solving complex problems through cooperation with natural forces rather than brute force domination. Your species has achieved something remarkable, Extraterrestre said as the day drew to a close. You have developed advanced technology without losing touch with the principles that govern natural systems. Most civilizations face a choice between technological advancement and environmental harmony. You have found a way to achieve both. Marcus shrugged. We had to. Our planet couldn't survive the traditional approach to industrialization. We either learned to work with our environment, or we destroyed ourselves. And now you have technology that surpasses civilizations with thousands of years of space travel experience. In some areas, maybe, but we're still learning. That's why I was excited to meet you. Your research on civilization development could help us understand our own path better. Extraterrestre felt a warm sensation that had nothing to do with the shelter's climate control. For the first time in decades, it was being treated not as a superior being dispensing knowledge to primitives, but as a colleague with valuable insights to share. I would be honored to collaborate with you, the alien said. But I must admit I suspect I will learn more from you than you will from me. That evening, as they worked together in Marcus's workshop, Extraterrestre began to understand that it had stumbled upon something unprecedented in galactic history. Here was a species that had achieved technological advancement without losing its connection to the natural world. Their engineering was not just more efficient than hegemony technology, it was fundamentally different, based on principles that most civilizations never discovered. As the alien professor watched Marcus casually adjust quantum energy fields and guide molecular assembly processes, it realized that the most important lesson was not about human technology at all. It was about human philosophy. These beings had learned that the most advanced civilizations were not those that conquered their environment, but those that learned to dance with it, and the dance they had created was more beautiful than anything the galaxy had ever seen. 2 weeks had passed since Extraterrestre's ship had crashed in the Atacama Desert, and the alien professor no longer thought of itself as stranded. The crystalline being had settled into a routine of collaboration with Marcus that felt more natural than any academic environment it had known in decades of galactic travel. Each morning brought new discoveries, as they worked together in Marcus's expanded workshop. The human had built additional analysis equipment based on descriptions of hegemony research tools. But somehow, the human versions were smaller, more efficient, and more capable than the originals. Extraterrestre found itself taking notes on human engineering techniques to include in its research on advanced civilizations. The irony was not lost on the alien professor. It had come to Earth to study a primitive species, and instead found itself learning from master engineers whose technology surpassed anything in its experience. On this particular morning, Extraterrestre was working with Marcus on a new project, a communication array that could contact hegemony rescue ships across interstellar distances. The alien had expected to spend weeks explaining the complex requirements for faster-than-light communication, but Marcus had simply nodded and begun building. The quantum entanglement pairs should be stabilized now, Marcus said, adjusting what looked like a crystalline structure that somehow contained probability fields visible to the naked eye. Want to test the connection? Extraterrestre activated its personal communication device and was amazed to receive an immediate response from Hegemony Central Command over 40 light-years away. The connection was clearer than anything the alien had achieved with standard ship-based equipment. Rescue operations are already en route, Extraterrestre reported after ending the communication. They should arrive within 3 days. Marcus nodded absently, already focused on improving the efficiency of the quantum entanglement matrix. Good. Though I have to admit I'll miss working with you. This has been the most interesting project I've had in years. The alien professor felt something that might have been sadness. In 2 weeks of collaboration, it had learned more about advanced engineering than in decades of academic study. More than that, it had experienced a kind of intellectual partnership that was rare in the formal hierarchy of hegemony institutions. I have a proposal, Extraterrestre said carefully. My original research mission was to study the development patterns of emerging civilizations. I would like to request an extension of my stay to conduct a more thorough analysis of human technological development. Marcus looked up from his work with surprise. You want to stay longer? I thought you were eager to return to hegemony space. I was, before I understood what I had found here. The alien's crystalline form pulsed with excitement. Marcus, your species represents something unprecedented in galactic civilization. You have achieved technological advancement through harmony with natural systems rather than domination over them. This approach has led to capabilities that exceed what most species achieve through millions of years of traditional development. I appreciate the compliment, but we're really not that special. We just learned to work with what we had instead of fighting against it. Zixathari made that ice-cracking sound that Marcus had learned to recognize as laughter. Not special? Marcus, your shelter uses quantum energy extraction, molecular atmospheric processing, artificial gravity generation, and material science that exceeds hegemony standards in every category. You built it in 3 days using equipment you constructed from local materials. The equipment was already mostly built. I just had to adapt it. You had quantum energy extractors just lying around? Marcus shrugged. They're useful for all sorts of projects. Solar panel efficiency, power storage, environmental processing, basic sustainable technology. The alien professor spent a moment processing this statement. What Marcus called basic sustainable technology represented the pinnacle of achievement for most galactic civilizations. The implications were staggering. This is exactly why I need to extend my research, Zixathari continued. Your species has followed a completely different technological development path. Instead of the usual progression from simple tools to complex machines to eventual environmental destruction and recovery, you learned sustainability from the beginning. The result is technology that works with natural systems so effectively that it transcends traditional limitations. Over the next 3 days, as they waited for the hegemony rescue ship, Zixathari documented everything it could about human technological philosophy. The alien interviewed Marcus about the history of sustainable development on Earth, studied the integration of biological and mechanical systems, and analyzed the mathematical principles that allowed humans to achieve such extraordinary efficiency. The key insight, Zixathari recorded in its research notes, is that this species never separated technological development from environmental harmony. Where other civilizations saw nature as an obstacle to overcome, humans saw it as a partner to work with. This fundamental difference in approach has led to capabilities that most species consider impossible. When the hegemony rescue ship finally arrived, it was a massive vessel designed for long-range exploration and cultural contact. The ship's captain, a being called Kethmore from a species known for military precision, expected to find a stranded academic and a primitive world barely worth cataloging. Instead, Kethmore found Professor Zixathari living in accommodations that exceeded the ship's own luxury quarters, working with a human whose personal workshop contained technology the captain didn't recognize. Professor, we came as quickly as possible, Kethmore said after materializing from the ship's teleportation system. I trust these primitives have provided adequate care during your ordeal? Zixathari's crystalline form brightened with what the captain recognized as amusement. Captain, I would like you to meet Dr. Marcus Chen, Senior Research Engineer and Master of Sustainable Technology. Marcus, this is Captain Kethmore of the Hegemony Exploration Vessel Distant Shore. Marcus nodded politely and offered his hand in the human gesture of greeting. Welcome to Earth, Captain. I hope your journey wasn't too difficult. Kethmore looked at the offered hand with confusion, then at the gleaming shelter that Zixathari had been calling home. Professor, what exactly has been happening here? Education, Captain. I have been receiving an education in advanced engineering from a civilization that has achieved technological capabilities beyond anything in hegemony. Experience. The captain's attention was drawn to Marcus's workshop, where quantum energy fields were clearly visible, and molecular assembly systems worked quietly in the background. These are not primitive technologies. No, Zixathari agreed. They are not. Captain, I formally request an extension of my research mission. This civilization represents a unique development path that could revolutionize our understanding of technological advancement. Extension? Professor, your rescue mission costs significant resources. The Council expects you to return immediately. Then the Council should know that this species has mastered zero-point energy extraction, atmospheric molecular conversion, and biological-mechanical integration at efficiency levels that exceed our best laboratory results. They have achieved this using only the resources of a single planet, without any contact with galactic civilization. Captain Kethamore stared at Marcus, who was calmly adjusting a device that appeared to be manipulating local spacetime. You're saying this human's workshop contains technology superior to hegemony science? I'm saying this human considers such technology to be basic tools for environmental research. The captain walked slowly around Marcus's workshop, its sensors detecting energy patterns and molecular processes that its training had taught were impossible with portable equipment. The readings were undeniable. This primitive planet contained technology that would revolutionize hegemony civilization. Professor, Kethamore said slowly, I believe your research extension is warranted. I will recommend to the Council that we establish a formal academic exchange program. An excellent decision, Zixthari replied, though I suspect we will learn far more from them than they will from us. As the sun set over the Atacama Desert, 3 beings stood outside Marcus's research station, discussing plans for cultural and technological exchange. The hegemony had come to rescue a stranded academic from a primitive world. Instead, they had discovered a civilization that would change everything they thought they knew about the development of advanced technology. Marcus looked up at the stars becoming visible in the darkening sky and smiled. Humanity had always been good at making the best of unexpected situations. Now it seemed they were about to share that talent with the galaxy. The alien professor who had demanded basic shelter had instead received a demonstration of human ingenuity that would echo across the stars. Sometimes the most advanced civilizations were not those with the biggest ships or the most powerful weapons, but those that learned to build bridges between technology and nature, creating something more beautiful and more powerful than either could achieve alone. In the desert night, surrounded by friends from distant stars, Marcus Chen began planning humanity's first steps into a larger universe. It was going to be an interesting journey.